Likutei Sichos, Likutei, that's volume 17, the Sicha for Pirkei Avos on the Mishnah Kol Yisrael, which is typically recited as an introduction, as a preface for the recital of Pirkei Avos each and every week. We're going to learn what is the true meaning, the true translation of the word Olam Haba, literally the world to come. Also, we'll get a deeper insight and appreciation for what's greater, heaven or earth. So the custom is that before we begin to recite the Pirkei Avos each and every week throughout the 6 weeks between Pesach and Shavuos, and then later those who continue throughout the entire summer, before we begin, we preface it with the Mishnah, Kol Yisrael yesh lahem chelek l'olam haba. Each and every Jew has a share in the world to come. Shenemar, as it says, Hashem says to the prophet Isaiah, Ve'amich kulam tzadikim, and your nation, your people, are all righteous. Lo'olam yirshu aretz, they shall inherit the land forever. Neitzer matoi, they are a branch of my planting, says Hashem. Maaseh yodai, the work of my hands, lihispoer, for my name to be glorified. So from this we understand that this Mishnah has a special connection to Pirkei Avos, and that is the reason why it's always offered as an introduction to the recital of Pirkei Avos. But we need to understand. The question is, it seems, that what is Olam Haba? What is the world to come? That is a reward for all of the service, all of the performance of mitzvahs that a Jew does for Hashem. So why do we specifically recite it in conjunction with Pirkei Avos? To answer this, let's take a look. In general, what's Pirkei Avos? Regarding the lessons of Pirkei Avos, meaning the teachings of Pirkei Avos, you find actually what seems to be two extremes. On the one hand, what is it? It's ethics and moral values that are not necessarily from the category of mitzvahs of the Torah. And as the Bartanura puts it, that these are all full of, the Pirkei Avos that is full of morals and values, which perhaps also the, quote, wise sages of all the other nations also thought it up on their own and compiled and authored various books on these matters. So this points to the idea that these morals and values are actually to address the lowliness, perhaps the vulnerability of the human being, and to try to encourage the person to be a better person. So that's on one hand. On the other hand, however, we find another extreme. The sages tell us, there's a quote in the Talmud that says, Haiman de boy lemevi chasida, one who wishes to be extra pious. What is the suggestion? What is the advice of the Talmud? Lekayem milad avis. He should be diligent in matters that appear in these chapters in Pirkei Avos, which this seems to indicate of the loftiness of the individual who wants to engage in and pursue greater lofty levels, that they in order to accomplish that, in order to achieve that, in order to achieve higher levels, higher stature in the service of Hashem, one studies Pirkei Avos. So that's as far as the teachings of Pirkei Avos. Now we also find two extremes that almost parallel this when it comes to the reasons stated why we recite the Pirkei Avos in this time period. In other words, why it's recited between Pesach and Shavuos, and then especially later throughout the summer. On the one hand, a reason is given that since during this time period, as the climate gets warmer, as the sun starts to come out, the tendency is that people become more lax in their diligence and in their awareness of what's right and wrong, and their bodily desires seem to increase and become more active. And therefore, we learn this to remind us, what our duty is, where we're supposed to stand and not allow ourselves to slip. So in short, this seems to point in the direction that what's the reason for why we recite this is to address the loneliness of the people. On the other hand, however, we find another extreme. It's not just the lowly people, it's not just the simpletons who recite Pirkei Avos, it's everybody who recites Pirkei Avos, even the greatest rabbis and the greatest, most pious people. So this seems to indicate that there is another extreme where, again, this is applicable and has a strong teaching, so to speak, has a strong connection also to the most loftiest amongst us. Says the Rebbe, because of these two extremes that we just pointed out, this is precisely the reason why we recite this Mishnah, Kol Yisrael Yesh Lam Chelik Olam Haba, that every single Jew has a share in the world to come, and it makes it clear and understood why we're saying Pirkei Avos and how these two extremes come together, as will be explained. So let's take a look for a moment. What is Olam Haba? What does this mean when we say Olam Haba, the world to come? Typically, people associate it, and it is most of the time associated with what we call Gan Eden, heaven. However, over here in this Mishnah, the meaning of Olam Haba is Olam Hatchia, the world of resurrection that will come about after Mashiach comes, and then there will be a resurrection with the neshamas, the souls. And many of these souls could perhaps have been hundreds, if not thousands of years up there in Gan Eden, up there in heaven, receiving their reward, will come back down into the body. Hashem will rebuild the bodies, and there they will receive their reward in the world to come. That means literally it's the world to come. See, by the way, the Rambam explains when we refer to Gan Eden as the world to come, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist now. It means that it's something that we don't have access to. We don't have the privilege of seeing, and therefore it's to come only in the afterlife. But over here, when we say Olam Haba, we mean literally the world to come, which will be after the end of time, after Mashiach comes, when the neshama comes back into the body. Now, this is something which is going to be equal for all Jews. However, Gan Eden is not. The reward in Gan Eden is not equal for all. Why? You see, because Gan Eden, meaning the reward in heaven, is specifically for the soul. It's not for the body. It's after the soul departs the body. And that reward is primarily for the study of Torah. Now, the study of Torah, by definition, is something that is not equal for all. Not all understand on the same level. Not all have access to the teachings of the Torah. Not all are capable of studying Torah on the same level. And therefore, it follows that the reward is also not equal for all. However, when we speak about Olam Haba, as it applies here, we're talking about the world of the resurrection. After the neshamas will come back in the guf, the souls will come re-enter the bodies, then the reward is primarily for the fulfillment of, for the performance of the actionable mitzvahs. That in this, everybody is equal, even those that seem to be on the lowest standing of observance, as the Talmud itself says, regarding even the so to speak, the worst Jews, the most sinful Jews. The Talmud says, Meleim mitzvahs keriman, that they are full, quote, full of mitzvahs, like a pomegranate is full of seeds. That makes up the fruit. So the question is now, if this is the case, it seems that tchiyas hamesim, meaning the reward that will come after the resurrection of the dead, is a far greater reward, because it's equal for everyone. It's a reward that comes after, as I mentioned, after some of these souls who have been thousands of years already receiving a reward. You don't take something to go from a higher reward to a lower reward. Obviously, you go from a lower reward to a higher reward. So if this is only going to come after the end of time, after they've already received their reward in Gan Eden for so many years, so many centuries and millennia, so the question is, if this in fact is a greater reward, this seems to be a very curious question that pops up. Something that seems to be a discrepancy here. Why? Because in regards to Gan Eden, in regards to the reward, that's exclusive for the soul. As we stated, in the afterlife, the soul as it is void from the body, over there we say it's not equal for all. But when it comes to the reward, which is in the after, at the end of the days, when it comes to the reward of after Tchiyas HaMeisim, there we say, even though it's a greater reward, logically, but still everybody is equal in it, everybody will receive their share. Kol Yisrael yesh lem chelek l'olam. All Jews have an equal share in the world to come. So how do we make sense of this? So the explanation for it is as follows. True that externally, meaning outwardly, it looks like that the reason that all are equal in action of mitzvot, in other words, when it comes to the literal implementation of a mitzvah, let's take, for example, putting on tefillin. There is no difference in the physical action of putting on tefillin between a simpleton and the greatest tzaddik. When it comes to the thought process, when it comes to the kavanah, to the intent, and all the contemplation of the deeper meaning, the esoterics, obviously there's a difference. But when it comes to the actual physical action of doing the mitzvahs, all seem to be equal. And outwardly, it seems like, what is the reason for this? Because it's something so simple, so basic, it doesn't require any whatsoever emotion, it doesn't require any whatsoever intellectual capacity, and therefore everybody can be equal for it. So it seems to be, so to speak, lower because of a lowly reason that everybody can be equal. However, says the Rebbe, no. Bipnimius, meaning esoterically, the reason why everybody is equal when it comes to the implementation, the physical, actionable implementation of a mitzvah, is because in the essence of Hashem, what was the deepest intention? What was the deepest purpose? What was the desire that Hashem had in creating the world? As it states, that he desired to have a dira b'tachtonim, quote, a dwelling place down here in the lowly worlds. Now, since this intent can only be fulfilled, ultimately, how? By an actionable mitzvah being implemented in the tachtonim, in the lowly parts of the world, with the actual lowly physical parts of the world. Therefore, it comes out that this action on the deepest level fulfills the true intent of the essence of Hashem. Now, the Jew, because the Jew is, quote, Neitzer Matoi, a branch of my planting, Maaseh Yodai, the work of my hands, so therefore the Jew has an essential inner feeling, an inner, so to speak, understanding, a subconscious inner feeling to implement Hashem's inner desire, the desire of the essence. In other words, the essence of the Jew has a disposition to fulfill the will, the desire of the essence of Hashem, because it's so connected. And in this, all Jews are equal. In the deep down essence of every Jew is equal, and in the implementation, the fulfillment of the actionable mitzvahs, all are equal. And this is the reason why when it comes to the ultimate reward being after Tchiyas HaMeisim, after resurrection of the dead, it's going to be equal for all, and it's going to be specifically the neshamot, the souls in the body. In other words, the reward will be to the body. Why so? Because since the ultimate desire of Hashem has been fulfilled by then, because this is the end of time, and what was the ultimate desire? That there should be a dira b'tachtoinim. It should be a dwelling place in the tachtoinim. So this gets mirrored in the fact that Hashem chose the body of a Jew. That's where you realize, that's where there is a clear realization that Hashem didn't only choose the neshama of a Jew, the soul of a Jew, but the ultimate choice, the ultimate purpose of all was the body of a Jew. And interesting that this also gets mirrored, this gets expressed in the fact that we know the sages tell us that not only is the soul of a Jew eternal, but it comes out that even the body of a Jew has a certain element that is eternal. And that is that there is an etzem luz. There is a certain bone which the Talmud describes as being called luz, somewhere in the back, a certain point in the spine, that is not destructible. It's indestructible. And that bone is the one that lasts forever, regardless of the circumstance. And it says, quote, from that bone, Hashem will rebuild the entire body. Thus we see that the body of the Jew ultimately is what Hashem really chose, and that's what it becomes eternal. And therefore, in that time, when the ultimate purpose has been fulfilled, and it will become the resurrection of the dead, then will be the ultimate reward. But to who? To the lower one, to the lower part, not to the soul, to the lofty part of the Jew, but that part which seems to be lower. The body, that will be that will be the one that will receive the reward, because there will we see we will realize and recognize the true reflection of what Hashem's desire was and how it got fulfilled. And now we can understand why we introduce every single time we read the Pirkei Avos, why we introduce it by prefacing with this Mishnah. You see, in order to highlight that the refinement of the coarseness of the body applies to every single Jew in both ways. Number one, to emphasize that the body is the Maaseh Yodai Lehispor. The body is, quote, the work of my hands, and this is what brings me glory. And this is telling us that no Jew could, so to speak, write himself off and say, well, I can't do it. My body can't be refined. I am not capable of this. Every single body is capable of it, because on every single body of a Jew, Hashem says, this is my choosing. This is my handiwork. This is what's going to bring me glory. But on the other hand, it's not just the lowly people that need to refine their body, but it tells us that also the greatest and most refined Jew that seems to be on the loftiest level is not too high from still engaging in this and refining themselves further and further fulfilling this intent of Hashem, this kavanah of Hashem, the purpose of why Hashem created the world.